All right, all right. Hello out there. Welcome to the inaugural office hours based here in the New York or New North America time zone. I am Aaron from Solace. Happy to be coming live from Ottawa, Canada. I'm usually based in Singapore, but finally got my double vaccinations and I came home for a visit. So I'm actually at my mom's house right now. So I'm coming to you live from Ottawa. Solace headquarters is just around the corner. And yeah, this is our kickoff, kind of our first North America time zone event of the office hours. We've done them in Singapore, we've done them in Europe, and now we're doing them here. So to help with that, to aid me, I'm going to bring in my special guest, Leah. Hey, how you doing?
Hey Aaron, how's it going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Pretty good. Have
Um,
smoky skies here in California, but otherwise good to go.
all right. So good morning to you. It's 9 a.m. in California. It's
Thank you.
noon here in Singapore, 5 p.m. in London town. And thank you for joining us. We are live on LinkedIn, we are live on YouTube and on Twitter. Uh, we're here to answer your questions for the next hour. So put them up in the chat. We'll be happy to take them. Leah, why don't you introduce yourself while I get started here?
Sure, yeah. So I am a sales engineer based, as you kind of know already, in California. I've been with Solace for 5 years. Prior to my sales engineer role, I was actually in the global training position. So traveling around the world to provide customer training to those who wanted to learn a little bit more about Solace, both on the administrative side, developer side, kind of covering a lot of different topics. So happy to be on and pretty excited for this.
Happy to have you, Leah. So yeah, I mean, talking of travel, obviously the world has been a bit weird for the last year and a half or so. It was very
Yes.
strange getting on a plane to come home. I'll tell you that it was very weird. But I'm happy to be back in Canada for a little visit. So um, right, well, that's great intro. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, put a question in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. You can see the community there.
Yes, I can. Looks
Excellent.
good.
Okay, so head over to solace.community where you can post questions. You can get upcoming tips and tricks, broker release, new features, APIs, early access to stuff. Solace community is the place to be. So make sure you head over there and sign up if you haven't already and you're listening to me wherever you're listening to me. Quick announcement, coming up next Tuesday, we have the second round of our lightning talks hosted by my colleague Tamimi. You can see it here on the left. We keep our kind of events here on the left. Well, my internet's going a little slow. I hope it's not too bad for everybody else. But yeah, it's next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. We have Solace community members, their users, their customers from both North America and Europe presenting. And that's going to be next week. So that's quick little talks, 10-minute talks each, and kind of showing what people are doing with Solace the broker. So be sure to tune into that, add it to your calendar of things to check out. Now, I usually kind of, we got a few comments here.
Yeah.
Hey, Tamimi's listening. Hey, hello from Vancouver. Another early morning 9 a.m. person. How's it going? And yeah, Tamimi's plugging his talks there. So right, be sure to check those out next Tuesday. It should be good. Of course, you can watch the recording later if the time zones don't suit you. So yes, Tamimi, we will be there. Okay, now usually we take questions live from the chat, and if we don't have any, we'll kind of look through the community for some.
We actually already have one. Sorry to jump in there. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, go for it.
Can you please explain a good solution for Solace congestion issue? Yeah, I guess it depends on the exact congestion issue you're talking about here. One example, I guess, could be a queue that might be filling up. So in the Solace case, we use queues to buffer messages for guaranteed delivery for an end consumer. If your queue is filling up, that either means your consumer is potentially not connected, or it's not consuming at a rate that's fast enough for the messages that are coming into the queue. So I guess a couple of options that we could look at there is, if you want to load balance the consumption of those messages off the queue, we do have an access type called a non-exclusive queue. So that allows you to bind multiple consumers to that queue, and they will, in a round-robin fashion, receive the messages. So that can help with consumers who might be slower. You have now multiple consumers to get that data. If your consumer's offline, obviously that's another problem you want to look into. Why did it disconnect, or was there a cause of that, or was it simply a network issue, or something of that nature? So that would be something else to look at. I don't know if you want to add in a
Well,
scenario there.
I think my hand's a little shaky. I think congestion, congestion can occur in many places, right? Are we talking at the network layer? Are we talking at the messaging layer? Are we talking about direct messaging? Or are we talking about guaranteed messaging? Yeah, generally congestion usually means that your consumer is not able to keep up with the full message rate. And the broker will kind of buffer things, be it on a queue for persistent messaging, or in the kind of the non-persistent, the direct messaging buffers if it's for direct. But generally, yeah, you have to either speed up your consumer's processing, load balance your consumers, either using a non-exclusive queue for guaranteed, or using the shared consumer or shared subscription capability for direct messaging, which Leah has a great blog on and a video, I believe. You did a video on that, didn't you?
I did, yeah. A little while back. So shared subscriptions is actually an MQTT protocol feature or functionality, and we've adopted that for both MQTT and for our own protocol SMF. The way shared subscription works is for direct messaging, you effectively share subscription. So there's 5 different subscribers that come on. They all, in general, want the same type of data, so they're subscribed to the same topic, but they want to, in a round robin fashion or load balance fashion, receive that data. So Aaron's got the example or the form here for SMF. So that starts with a hash share to indicate that it is a shared subscription. Yeah. The second level there, the share name, is actually kind of a group indicator. So you can have multiple different groups that share the same subscription and load balance within those groups. So that's what that share name is. And then after that is your standard subscription of the data that you're interested in.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say probably the majority of Solace users these days are probably using guaranteed messaging. So, this is only applicable for your direct messaging or your QoS 0 if you're using MQTT. If you're using persistent messaging, you want to look at non-exclusive queues. Now, you could be talking about congestion on the broker itself. It's possible that if your broker is experiencing a high rate of load of messages, perhaps they're very large messages and they're persistent, that means your disk is going to be, worked very hard. We run into performance and bottleneck issues in the cloud, especially because a lot of cloud-based compute services are built for CPU and memory, and not necessarily for fast disk access and network capabilities, which is what kind of an event broker like Solace requires. So if you're experiencing a slow broker where you cannot publish persistent messages into it fast enough, you might need to consider looking at your disk, your performance of your disk, maybe the latency of the round trip time to it if it's cloud deployed, and stuff like that. So if you want to add more detail, please do. If that was enough explanation, we only do these office hours once in a while, but we're always hanging out at Solace Community. So if you want to follow up on your question there, be sure to post on the Solace Community. So yeah, anything else, Leah? Is that?
No, I think that was good and a great question.
Thank you for that. All right. Oh, thanks for explaining. All right, very good. Like I said, come ask us more details on Solace Community. If you have them, we're happy to take this offline and talk there. So, okay. Well, while we wait for our next question to come in live, I am going to go and pull up a question that someone actually asked on the thread where Hong announced our office hours here. So let me just pull this. Hey, Leah, I can hear an echo of myself in my ear. Can you hear an echo of me?
I can't. Hopefully the viewers don't hear that echo.
Yeah. So this question was posted yesterday by our member, brand new member, post number 1. Yeah, okay. So what is the best practice when we publish a message? Will it be topic listener or REST API call from Solace, as the message will have a JSON body which may need validation? So yeah, do you want to lead off, or do you want me to take this as a first stab, Leah?
Yeah. What's best practice?
There's a couple. There's a
Um,
couple things here, I think. So we can.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so best practice in general when publishing a message to Solace, Solace does support queues, but we also support topics, and topics with Solace are hierarchical, or they have multiple levels to them, and those different levels typically um, they speak to attributes of that message. So the topic becomes a description of the message and ultimately how you want to route that data. So we want you to publish to a topic typically because now you have all those attributes and you can actually do wildcarding on those different attributes. The really cool thing is you can actually have a queue be a topic subscriber. So now your queue is listening to those topics and is able to buffer those within the queue itself. And why do you want that queue potentially? It's really for guaranteed delivery. So to ensure at least once delivery of data, you'll want that queue where messages will come into that queue and we'll buffer them and pass them along to the consumer as they're available. The topic goes onto that queue to bridge the filtering and the fine-grained routing of topics to that queue functionality. When you're using direct messaging, you just use the topics there.
That's right. So yeah, that's by far our one of our biggest best practices that we try to tell people about is, yeah, in Solace world, because our topic capabilities, our topic routing capabilities are so advanced, multi-level, hierarchical, with wildcards, it's always best practice to publish on a topic. And if you're using guaranteed messaging, you're going to be using a queue with a topic subscriber on that. That queue will have a subscription to attract those messages. And of course, you have to make sure that your delivery mode, which is kind of your quality of service for that publisher, is set to persistent. So even though you're publishing on a topic, you can still tell it to be persistent, and that way the broker will send you acknowledgments or negative acknowledgments, NACs, if something goes wrong in that delivery, so the publisher is aware. So that's around publishing the message. And then it sounds like there's a second kind of follow-up, which is about the consume side. Will it be a topic listener or a REST API call from Solace? And then we can talk about the body a little bit later. So as Leah said, if you're using direct messaging, yes, you're typically using you're just subscribing to the topic directly. If you're using persistent messaging, guaranteed messaging, you actually have the choice. There's two different persistent endpoints in Solace. By far the more common is to use a queue. It is more fully featured, it has more advanced capabilities, and you can add topic subscriptions to it. So it's kind of, you can think of it as a persistent topic listener with multiple subscriptions. The other one, which I'll just mention, but we typically don't recommend, except for certain use cases, is our topic endpoint. And that is also a persistent storage endpoint for messages, but it can only have one topic subscription on it. And that topic subscription is assigned at bind time. So typically used for JMS, kind of durable subscriber type applications, but not quite as flexible as queues with topics subscriptions on them, right? So
I did actually write a blog kind of differentiating a queue and a topic endpoint and what the differences are and why you would want to use typically a queue over a topic endpoint. So if you do want to learn a little bit more and kind of read it at your own pace, then that is a great option just to get a quick, it's fairly short read. So
let's see if I can find it here. Queues versus topic endpoints.
That should do it, I would hope.
Blog, here we are.
There we go.
Yes. Leah, we're plugging all of your blogs and videos and everything. So
I've got a couple blogs in there, so hopefully you find them useful and get a better understanding of the specific features I'm focusing on in here. So
yeah, so Leah's really leveraged her kind of training background at Solace, going through all the different roles like support, then training, then SE, to write a really good set of blogs on kind of Solace fundamentals. So be sure to look out for her blogs. They are definitely great to get you started on Solace and explaining some of the fundamental kind of options and features that we have. So one thing that was mentioned, a REST API call from Solace. So this is a feature that is actually becoming more and more heavily used, where Solace, rather than using a I guess, a always online kind of messaging connection, where you have our API and you have to use a Solace API or one of our open standard APIs to consume messages, is the broker has the ability to do a REST webhook. It can post or put a message from a queue out to a URL that you specify. And this is using a feature that we call a REST delivery point, so an RDP. And yeah, you configure that. There's in the manager GUI, there's kind of a connection wizard that can help you get that set up. But essentially, you say any message that lands on this queue, I want to post it to a URL over there. And yeah, it's a great way to integrate with REST-based microservices or cloud native services. Um, yeah, actually, you did a live stream not too long ago with Tamimi, where you took
I
a look at our
did.
RDPs and pointed them at Azure cloud native services, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so we had effectively a webhook or a trigger to an Azure function, and then that Azure function basically sent that data to a Power BI dashboard. That's just, of course, one of many use cases you could use that kind of flow for. But we were populating a Power BI dashboard and could create reports from that to understand taxi data, who was speeding and who was driving under the speed limit consistently. So you can check that out. That's on the YouTube page, and it goes into some detail there.
It should be on YouTube somewhere. It should be searchable. So
Yeah.
in terms of which is a best practice, whether you use a topic listener or a queue consumer with a topic subscription versus a REST API, using the webhook RDP capability of Solace, that really is up to you. That's up to your use case. It depends on what your downstream consumer is. It's more efficient and higher performance to use a Solace API or a messaging API such as AMQP or MQTT. But the REST API, the REST messaging API capability that Solace has is very convenient to kind of just stick a message from a queue out to a RESTful microservice or cloud service. And the last part of this is talking about JSON body, which may need validation. So one thing about Solace is that we are payload agnostic. The broker does not look at the contents of your actual payload of your message. All of the routing information that is required to determine where this message should go, the quality of service, is there a response required, all of that is embedded in the various header metadata. So you can think of it like a Cisco internet switch or a router. It looks at the IP address, maybe the port, but it's not looking at the contents of that packet to figure out how to route it. So any kind of validation of the body, any kind of checks and balances that need to happen outside of the event broker at the kind of application layer. So yeah, typically, I guess as Leah mentioned earlier, the topic can be quite descriptive. Often there might be some kind of additional data in there to indicate what kind of format the message should be. There's also various message headers, such as message type, which can specify a schema identifier if you want, which can help in kind of validation. But the broker itself does not look at the payload at all.
I wanted to add, we actually have an event portal feature as well, or product that sits on top of an event broker. And that event portal can help you understand the interactions between your applications and the events or data that's moving between those different applications. Now, while it doesn't do JSON validation per se, you can use this as a tool or a source of documentation for what your payload should look like or is expected to look like. This can be really useful for developers to go in. You can double click on any event and see this is the format that the schema is supposed to be in. It's supposed to be in JSON or it's supposed to be in XML, and you can define all of that within here. So it's a single kind of source or a single place of truth for your developers, architects, and anyone else that might want to look at the information.
That's right. Thanks for mentioning that, Leah. Yeah, of course, we have the event portal, free to sign up, free to try. And in here, yeah, you can specify the contents of all of your data. So to ensure that when you do code generation or whatever else, it does build in that validation part. But again, this is at the application layer and not necessarily at the broker layer. So
yeah,
there we go. Here's a JSON schema. Nobody has ever seen one before. I'm sure most people have. So yeah, there's the kind of three answers to I think a multi-part question. Shanmuganand, I hope that answered your questions. Thanks for posting there. I'll be sure to follow up in this thread with a link to the video once we get it posted online. So awesome.
perfect.
All right, hey.
We've got a lot of action in the chat here. So Thomas actually has a question. So I hear that Solace has a nifty new feature called delayed delivery. Curious minds want to know more. Can you explain it? Yeah, so delayed delivery is a feature of a queue. So if you want to, as it sounds, delay the delivery of messages to a specific consumer or off of a queue itself, there is an attribute or a property on the queue that basically sets it's effectively a timer. And so as that timer is ticking down, we're going to hold on to those messages. And when the timer expires, per message, we will end up sending that to the connected consumer. So this is new as of, which version is that? 9.9?
9.9, I think.
10? Yeah. So it's in the latest release of the broker. So if you're looking for it, you will have to make sure you're on the latest version. And it can be a really useful tool. Previously, delayed delivery was done through expiring messages to a dead message queue and then consuming them off there, which is definitely not quite as clean and adds, a little bit more complexity with different moving parts. So this new delayed delivery feature is long awaited, I think, for some, and should be super helpful.
That's right. Yeah. So this is brand new. I'm glad you answered, Leah, because I haven't played with it yet, and I hate talking about features and things that I haven't actually touched and configured, myself. So yeah, this is the old school way of doing it with a DMQ and some TTLs. But yeah, brand new feature, just got released. Update your brokers to the latest and greatest, and you will be able to kind of build in delayed delivery. I've had discussions in person and on the community with kind of best practices around how to do this. We have, there's actually a community member somewhere, I'll have to go find the thread, but they were doing it with, in an application. They basically would consume messages and delay messages inside the application state and then republish back out. And so now, yeah, it's all built into the broker. They won't have to have extra applications pulling messages off the queue and republishing them 10 seconds later. So very convenient, I think.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your curiosity there, Thomas. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions. And as Aaron's mentioned, Solace Community is a great place to go if you have questions after the live stream or want to get more information on them.
That's right. Thanks, Thomas. Apparently my audio is fine. So
good to hear.
That's good. And Tamimi also says fine. So it's just annoying me. That's great.
Sorry about that.
Going in my head. Hey, Mark. All right. Hey, you're welcome. And thank you to Leah for being my guest speaker today. It's always great to have other Solace colleagues jump in here and chat with us. All right, we got another question down here. I read somewhere about topic properties which use a key value pair. I was wondering what the use case of that is. All right. I assume we're talking about the user properties. That's what I would guess, right, Leah?
Yeah, it's possible. Or maybe having a variable in the topic itself. I could see that as being kind of a point. But the specific call out to a key value pair does make me think it's related to what we call application or user properties. So Solace routes data based off of the topic, which is a header property. Sometimes in applications or in specific application flows, you might want to add your own properties. And so we have this user property section. And so that is effectively where you can add a key value pair or a multiple to that section and access it a little bit more easily than if it were in the payload. One case where you might want to do this in particular is if you have a need to use selectors. You can use selectors on that metadata or that user property section. Another case could be if you want to add your own application message ID, for example. Love the script there they're writing.
It's so wiggly. It's not great, my touchscreen.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, so the message here is the topic, which is part of the header. So you've got the topic and any other metadata. You've got that user property section for the key value pairs that you might want to add, and then that payload, which is of course actual data you're sending. It could actually also be nothing if you don't actually have any specific data and all the data is kind of defined in the user properties or in the topic itself. That is sometimes something that you could see.
That's right. Okay, so yeah, part of my very messy handwriting here. I'm gonna have to figure out a better way to do this for the next one. But yeah, the user properties. There's a boatload of various Solace headers that you can use that are built into the kind of the header of the message. Application message ID, correlation ID, reply to, message type, expiration, TTL, a bunch of other things. But sometimes, yeah, you need to be able to have additional key value pairs. So outside of the payload, you can actually specify this as a map, as a key value pair map. And the really cool thing about that is if you're using persistent messaging, you can do additional routing or filtering based on that user property map. And this is with the use of selectors. So by far, our most common routing kind of behavior is using topics. We talked about hierarchical topics and wildcards on those topics. But if you need something more advanced, maybe using arithmetic, or selectors are essentially an SQL-like query language, and it can actually take a look at the user property map and do additional routing in there. People that have used TIBCO EMS and other kind of JMS enterprisey type brokers are quite used to selectors. Solace has them as well. Topic routing will give you better performance. So we generally say if it's a fairly simple routing query like name equals John, just put the name as a level of the topic. But yeah, selectors can do some more advanced stuff. So that is another great use of the user properties, is that kind of additional level of filtering that you can do in the broker without actually having to look at the payload of the message as a consumer. So unlike Kafka, for example, if you have KSQL or K-streams and you're kind of doing some filtering, the KSQL pulls all the messages out of a single topic and has to look at each message individually in order to filter it and then write it back into the broker on that kind of filtered topic. Whereas in Solace, there's two levels of filtering inside the broker before it even moves out into the kind of application space. So that's the topic routing. And then if there's additional stuff, you can use selectors on the user property. So yeah.
When you can, I might just add that best practice is to focus on trying to use topics as much as you can. They are actually faster at processing, especially one of our form factors is a hardware appliance. There is some amount of performance difference that can be seen when you're using selectors versus a topic. And that's because topics on our hardware appliance are routed in hardware, whereas selectors do use software. So there is a bit of a performance difference there to be aware of. In general, topics is the focus of how we filter. So it is the recommended method. But as Aaron said, if you need to do something a little bit more fancy and do arithmetic or a conditional, you can use this user properties component and make use of selectors for that. And I guess I'll add selectors do work differently. So plug on my blogs again, that same one from before, but that is one of the differentiators between a topic endpoint and a queue, also known as a queue endpoint. You can read all about it in here, but it does describe the difference where selectors are basically where selectors are actually processed on a message. Is it at the ingress or the egress of the queue or topic endpoint itself? So
that's right. So slightly different behavior based on your endpoint. So you can get, if you really want to use selectors, you can't, do something with just topic filtering, then yeah, you can kind of get to this next level of features and capabilities at the persistent endpoint. But yeah, if you just want to use a user property to store some random things outside of the payload, maybe your payload is super huge and you don't want to have to, deserialize it just to figure something out, if you just have a couple key value pairs in the header, that can save you some processing bandwidth, right? You can say, I know this is an XML or a JSON payload. You could put that maybe in your user property or the type of message. And then you say, okay, now I know how to deserialize this big binary blob that came in as the payload, for example, right?
Yeah.
That could work. Yeah. Cool. All right. I think that was a good answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple others here. LinkedIn user, I guess someone who's coming in anonymously here. So what are your favorite products and features?
About Solace or in the world,
I'm going to take that as for Solace.
Okay.
Personally. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess thinking about it, it depends on the use case and what you're interested in, how the data is moving through the system. But I think the new event portal, which we showed for a little bit there, is something that's not there's not a lot of options for that. And looking at event-driven architecture documentation, previously a lot of that was done in kind of like a Visio or a PowerPoint or spreadsheet, and it's really quite hard to maintain those forms. So this event portal is really going to help with that documentation. There's actually a discovery component as well, which will help you kind of automate populating the portal. So this view is the designer view, which you can see is kind of a graphical representation of how the data is moving. Yep. There's a searchable catalog or menu, so you can go in and search, hey, I want to look for an event paid or something of that nature, and it'll come up with all of the options that relate to that, not looking just at the event name, but also looking in the topic address and maybe a description. And all the different components that you might fill into that specific event itself. The discovery, as I said, kind of pre-populates that or automatically populates that for you. And currently we actually support Kafka brokers and Solace brokers. So if you do have a Kafka deployment you want to visualize, the event portal is a great option. And yeah, there's going to be more broker support coming as well. So very useful tool, very useful component to visualize your event-driven architecture.
Like one of my favorites that I've done a couple of demos with, and I have a code lab on. Speaking of, maybe if we're plugging our own things, I'll plug my code lab. Is the Solace micro gateway feature. I think this does not get enough love and not enough use, but it essentially allows your Solace broker to act as a proxy or a pass-through for REST-based microservices. But when that message or when that REST call is going through the broker, it becomes a Solace message with a topic, with a hierarchical topic that you can then do routing on. And so if you want to be able to extend or event enable your REST-based architecture, if today it's all REST-based, all point-to-point kind of little microservices calling other microservices, you can put a Solace broker in the middle of that, have your REST endpoints and microservices still talk to each other the exact same way, but you can start to expand that architecture by just adding topic subscribers to those same messages. So, kind of allowing your RESTful microservices become publish subscribe. And I think that's a pretty cool feature that I don't think gets plugged enough by people. But the few customers that I know that have discovered it and integrated it with their kind of RESTful front end, like they'll still have their REST gateway at the edge of their kind of estate, in the DMZ to do all the validation and other stuff like that. But they'll have the micro gateway Solace broker inside, which can then do kind of routing and more kind of interesting stuff on the back end. So yeah, that's my favorite, I think. And multi-protocol, right? I think that's my other big one is MQTT.
I could go on and on about different features and functionalities. Multi-protocol is definitely a fantastic one for kind of bridging different business units, teams, getting your best of breed protocol that you want for a specific application and having them all talk to each other in a more simplistic manner. And the broker, I should add, it's dynamic protocol translation. And really what I mean by that is you don't really have to do anything. You just write your app and connect it in and it does it for you. So
That's right.
So
I
very
love
cool.
a lot of my demos have like a Java, standard kind of enterprisey app in like background publishing data, acting as kind of the back end service, and then using JavaScript lightweight messaging APIs on the front end. Integrating with Google Maps, integrating with D3.js to give you a very cool front end experience. And it's all talking to the broker. They're all connected to the same place. There's no bridging. There's no adapters. They're publishing, subscribing on topics directly to each other. And when you build in multiple brokers with the event mesh, it means you can essentially run stuff anywhere, right? As soon as you subscribe in one location, it's now that the subscription is propagated elsewhere. So, well, I think I lost Leah. Uh-oh. I hope I'm still online. I can't tell. Oh, Leah's disappeared. All right. I hope people can still hear me. I think I'm still online. Let's hope Leah comes back. All right, that was a long-winded kind of discussion of our favorite things. There's probably a few more that I had. Let's see. Does Solace try to connect to a DNS NTP server every 5 seconds? If yes, can we change it? Or can we change these settings? Hey, Leia's back. I'm gonna add her back in. Hello.
Sorry about that. I got kicked out. My Wi-Fi, my internet just dropped.
Yeah, that's that happens sometimes. One time my laptop decided to reboot about 5 minutes into the live stream with Tom, and I just disappeared for like he was like, "Uh-oh." So we had to run the show for a few minutes while I rebooted. So that was
Oh, goodness. Apologies for that.
all right, welcome back. So yeah, you can read it there, Leah.
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to go and take a look. I we Do you know? I mean, we do have NTP
I'm not.
server.
Yeah, so you can connect to an NTP server. The connection rate, I'm not entirely sure exactly what that is, and I'm not sure if it's configurable. That is something I'd have to kind of look at behind the scenes, if you will, and then come back to you. I think my suggestion would be to post it in the community, and we can have a look at it there and
click
get
this
an
button.
answer back.
Right. New discussion button. Post it there. Yeah, this is a fairly technical, tricky question. Like we'd have to go and double check. I can't memorize every single feature about Solace. So yeah, ask us there, and we'll find someone who knows the answer. So thanks, anonymous user, whoever you are. All right. Hey, cool Dev Ninja. All right. The event portal is very cool. I see you went over event API products. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. Is this a new feature
No,
in
we
the
didn't.
portal? How does that work with async API? Oh, he knows about async API. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it, Leah?
Sure, yeah. If you want to bring up the event portal, we can have a peek. So the event API products is a place where you can kind of group together specific events that you want to expose to internal and external parties. So here we've got just one event in this New York City Taxico public API. So we've got the ride updated event in there. And then what you can do is expose that. And there's a couple different ways of how you expose that. You could do it over a website, which doesn't look like it wants to load in this case.
Not loading. Yeah, live demo.
But you can also do it over just a REST API. There's a couple of different options. And what that allows you to do is almost provide a data as a service model. So you can expose the data and have just the specific data you want exposed available to those external or internal consumers of that. So that could be internal team, developer team who has access to it. Yeah,
that's why it says beta. That's why it says beta right there, because it's not quite ready, I guess.
It is a new feature. Cool Dev Ninja, you're correct there. But yeah, so that's really what it is, a way to group together like events and expose those. How it differentiates from the designer view is you can pick and choose specific events. So here we've got just 3 out of the application domain that it's from, which has about, let's say, 15 to 20. So you can pinpoint those specific ones. And now you've also been able to expose them who can subscribe to it. So all of these events can be subscribed to. And then the passenger upserted, we're also allowing the end user to be able to publish to it. So it's a very interesting and cool way to expose that data and make it available to, again, internal or external as you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it uses I think it uses async API in the background to kind of generate documentation around how to consume this, how to like what the format of the payload's going to be, um, and yeah, so and expose it as you can consume it as a REST consumer, an MQTT consumer, and so on. So uh, yeah, very easy way to share your event-driven APIs and the streams that come from them with customers, with third parties, and so on. So new feature, check it out. As is evident from my quick testing here, it's not working for me, but this is my internal account, so maybe it's just there is some upgrade happening or something.
That window that you were trying to open, just to give kind of context of what it would look like, if you're familiar with Swagger documentation, typically seen for REST APIs, it would be in kind of that form. You'd have drop downs for the different events. So that's kind of the format you'd be looking at. Something kind of like this,
Kind of
not
like
too
this,
far
yeah.
off. Yeah.
This is a very early um, thing that our team put together, and it's basically similar. It's like here's the different topics. You can see that we have variables in the topic name, and then the kind of the payload inside it. So it'll look something like this. As you said, it looks very much like OpenAPI Swagger style
Yeah.
documentation, and it'll be very familiar to a lot of developers out there who are used to RESTful kind of interactions. So great question. Thanks, Cool
Yeah.
Dev Ninja. Nice name. All right. Hey, so ask some more questions out there. Hope people are listening. I hope people are enjoying this and getting some good use out of it. Um, let's see. I think Apurva came back with a little bit more detail from our earlier question. Quite a lot to debug. Yes. Uh, the thing with event brokers or any kind of technology in the middle is that there's a lot of places where things can, you know, go not go wrong, but just like where things can happen, right? At the API layer, at the network layer, at the broker layer, at the disk. Um, you
Lots of
know,
components to look at, right?
right,
And try to understand what's exactly happening. So tools like, I'm gonna plug the portal, but tools like the portal or similar can help you try to understand at least the flow of events and kind of where you should attack your plan of attack, if you will, on troubleshooting. Where should you look first for a consumer congestion issue or for a publish issue, whatever it might be.
so in terms of where to look for, depending on how high performance we're talking, I've done some stints at some of our investment bank customers, and we are spending a day or so tuning Linux servers to get the highest throughput out of them. We're doing things like disabling turbo mode and sleep mode in BIOS, going into interrupt coalescence to make sure that there's no context switches happening. So you can have latency spikes because of that kind of stuff. Depending, you can go as you can really troubleshoot this stuff uh, quite detailed. We ran into one time at a customer, one of our caches would periodically just slow down, and we couldn't figure it out. And it turned out that whoever installed this cache put it on some kind of shared server, and there was another process that would kick off every once in a while during the day and consume all the CPU. And so our cache got starved out. So kind of noisy neighbor, I guess, type of behavior. So yeah, it had nothing to do with Solace. It was just this other thing, but it took us a while to debug it. So there's lots of places that things can go wrong and can happen. Um, but yeah, consumer side congestion, right? It almost always comes down to your consumer is not fast enough to keep up with the message rate. And there are techniques and ways to improve that. Obviously, just try to make your consumer go faster. You can use multi-threading perhaps. And if that doesn't work, you'll need to scale your consumer out, as we talked about, right? Using a non-exclusive queue, which does round robining. And if you need to shard your topic space, there's other options around that as well. I have a blog somewhere about kind of consumer groups in Solace and how to achieve that using topics and queues. So yeah, I think we talked about it quite a lot before, but yeah, make your consumer
I
go
guess
faster.
yeah, I guess one quick note on that is if you're using direct messaging, specifically, and they're a slow consumer, they should be kind of identified in the broker itself. So you can go to your clients tab of where you can see all the connected applications or the connections, and it should be indicated on there if the broker has deemed them as a slow consumer. Really, that's the broker saying their TCP window is blocked X amount of time, or 90% of the time, in this time frame, and that's kind of how the broker identifies and indicates it. So that's one place where you can go and understand if it's a slow consumer. If it's a queue, you would typically see that as the queue filling up. But let's see if we can.
For persistent messaging, yeah, if your queue starts to back up, that means you're slow. I mean, you can get spikes in publish. It's if you get a big publish burst because of some activity, that's fine. The queue can buffer that. It's when the average rate, publish rate, exceeds the average consume rate. That's kind of when things start to go wrong and your queue starts to trend upwards like that. So yeah, watching your queue fill up is how you at least alert or notify that your congestion is happening. And for direct messaging, yeah, there's somewhere in here, there's a kind of a slow consumers button.
Yeah, on the far right of that column,
right
it knows right now, so all your consumers are is consuming at a good rate. But that would indicate, it would switch to a yes and indicate this is the consumer that might be causing issues, and might be a little bit slower than it should be at consuming the information, the data.
For direct messaging. For direct messaging,
yes.
That's right, yeah. So if it's persistent, if it's guaranteed, watch for those queues filling up. Ideally, your queues should all be pretty much empty, right? Maybe a message or two as it flows through. But if any of your queues start to back up, that is kind of indicative that.
Except in the cases of, that peak. If you have a random spike, then yeah, you are going to see a couple messages in that queue, but it should, again, go back to around zero-ish, give or take. And you should always see kind of this state. Ideally, your message queues, that message bar, if you see it in the middle, is kind of an indication of how full your queue is. That should hopefully stay gray, or mostly gray, as you're sending messages. That kind of indicates fairly empty, and things are moving along quite well.
Yeah, you can see that these queues are configured with a fairly high threshold in terms of being alerted on. That's something that they've actually changed in recent, so right now my alert threshold is still at 80%, which is the old default that we've had for many, many years. And in the most recent version of the broker, or last version, they've lowered it down to, I think, 20 or 25, which is a much more reasonable number to alert on, in my opinion.
I was not aware of that. That's good to know.
Oh yeah. I found it out live on air with Tom. It was on another office hours, and I didn't actually see it. And,
well, I found it on air with you, so
there you go.
I'm learning stuff. It's perfect.
And now we're telling everybody that's listening. So I've been talking about this with customers and training for years. Typically, things in Solace world like connections and subscriptions, you always expect some number of them to be there, right? I mean, it's normal to have a number of connections, a number of subscriptions, a number of queues. And so don't alert me until they're getting quite full. But with messages on queues, if everybody is able to keep up and the consumers are keeping up with the publishers, your queues are almost always more or less empty, except for the occasional spike. So waiting until your queue is 80%, as it is here, to get an alert saying, hey, your queue is filling up, is way too late. You only have 20% of your queue left to go and call the app team and reboot the consumer or whatever you have to do to fix it. So yeah, it has now been lowered to 25, which is much better in my opinion.
And I guess we can, I don't know if everyone knows what so the raise is obviously when it's filled past that point. The clear is saying if it's gone above the raise point and then back below the clear configured amount, which is 60% in this particular scenario, then it will kind of throw another event to say, hey, you're probably good. Your queue is kind of cleared out a little bit, so you can worry less. I'm not sure what the new value of that clear is, but it is all configurable.
I think it's 10 or 15 for the new default, but yeah, everything's configurable. And these events, we in Solace world, we talk about event-driven architectures. We talk about events as messages, business events, like a shipping container has been put on a ship, or a car has passed through a tunnel. I don't know, whatever. These are broker events coming from the broker to indicate, a state change, such as a queue filling up, or I don't know, the hardware, maybe the fan died, something like that. And these are emitted as syslog events. So this would go into your monitoring infrastructure, be it Splunk or Elk or whatever syslog kind of ingest you have. So that's where these alerts will go. So I hope if you're running Solace in production that you have some all this broker data, the event log is getting routed somewhere and alerted on and watched. Kind of important.
It is, yeah.
All right. So that's all about. Oh, Leah's disappeared again. That's too bad. Bye bye. Maybe it's all those wildfires in California. It's messing with the air quality. She'll come back in a second here. Okay. So thanks for the follow up. I hope that was some extra help, some extra hints. There she is.
Goodness me, today
Yeah,
issues.
right. All right. Do we have another question? Nope, no more other questions. So let's we got about 8 minutes left. Let's take a quick poke around the community and see if there's a good question that we can put our heads together on. Do you have anyone that you wanted to call out?
Well, some of these we've kind of touched on in some manner, but there's one on where was it? Message IDs, but I think we've kind of touched on that. Yeah, that guy. We've touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of make note that there are different message IDs, and there's a lot of different properties you might want to pull from. And some are definitely more useful to an application developer than others. So message ID. So this is the ID that the Solace broker will put onto the message itself. And
Hold on. I'll be back.
Perfect.
Trying to do something. Sorry.
No, you're good. So that message ID is something that the Solace broker puts on the message, and it's not, I would say, as useful for the application to rely on. This is kind of for broker internal processing.
Yeah.
And
we're talking about the message ID that you'll see on your queue. If you go and take a look at your queue, it'll have this message ID here. That is not something that the user, the application, should be able to use. Right?
Something that could be useful is maybe you want to have a unique publisher ID put on the message, if that's useful to understand where this data originally came from. You could put a sequence number on that at that message as well. So now you understand this is the publisher it's from, and this is the 430th message that they've sent, or whatever it is. So that sequence number in the Solace message format or the Solace APIs is automatically added for you. You just have to set that property generate sequence numbers, just make sure that's set to true. There's also sometimes application message ID that can be added as well to messages. So that's something that's can be more user defined or developer defined. So you can kind of understand where that number is coming from a little bit more than the message ID the Solace broker does add. That's not quite as useful.
I'm just trying to pull up. I'm just trying to pull up a spreadsheet, Leah, because I actually made this spreadsheet of cool Solace properties that people might not know about. I'm trying to find it while you're talking here.
Okay.
So keep talking.
I'll think of some on the fly. What else are useful? The correlation ID. So that's needed. It's kind of required for request reply. In some scenarios I've seen in the past is the correlation ID is actually not used. And the problem with request reply is you need that correlation ID to, as it sounds, correlate or identify the original request with the original or with that response that's coming back. So that correlation ID is the same on the original request and the response. If you don't have that, then your requesting application basically assumes that it never receives a response for that request, and you're kind of in a weird state of you did receive the response, but you haven't acknowledged or identified that response. So that's definitely a useful one to make sure is set and is set appropriately for request reply scenarios.
Definitely need to have it, right? How else? Otherwise, if you're only sending one request at a time, then maybe which request is for which. But yeah, if you have multiple outstanding requests, you need to have that correlated to which response goes with which request, right? That's exactly what this is for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I made this spreadsheet because I kind of found that we have this information spread and peppered throughout our various documentation, but not kind of one reference. And so Mark has actually asked me to get this posted on the community. So if you want to know all about Solace header options, what they all are, what field, what it's used for, I kind of added my own kind of notes. This is not official. This is Aaron's kind of ideas, but I think it's pretty good.
No,
Um,
I think that looks great. I haven't seen this, but I would love a copy once it gets onto the community there.
Yep, I posted it on Slack
Fantastic.
several months ago, and someone kind of brought it up. One of our new SEs from France, Thomas, shout out to him. That he's like, "Hey, can we post this somewhere?" So I think we're gonna do this, and maybe try and get it into the docs. But yeah, I kind of go through all the various headers and things that are available in Solace and kind of what they're used for. These I don't have any. I need to finish it. Obviously, there's a few missing things here, but
Yeah, looks great though. I like the lot of good detail. Super useful when you're trying to understand all of these different properties, because I think a lot of our examples right now kind of only scratch the surface of some of these properties, looking at kind of the topic, delivery mode, and then maybe the reply to and correlation ID. But there's a lot more that are really useful. Sequence number can be great for tests as well, to understand where the first, second, third messages are going from a publisher. So
that's right. Yep. If you need to do kind of like a gap detection or other things like that can come in very much in handy. Yeah, a lot of the time our documentation is very factual and it'll tell you what it is, like this is a long or a string, but it might not tell you exactly how this is generally used in a lot of different various use cases. And that's something that as trainers, as systems engineers, professional services, people at Solace, we kind of work with customers and users to kind of figure this out based on their use case, but it's not something our documentation will generally go into like great detail on explaining the kind of specifics for which to use when and stuff like that, right?
yeah.
Anyway, I will post this at some point, but that was one thing that we want to cover on the community. There was kind of what headers to use and where to kind of find them.
Yeah, a little bit more about all those different message IDs, because there are quite a few of them. So when in doubt, you can always add your own, and or take advantage of the sequence numbers, really.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We have time for one more. We got 2 minutes here, 2 minutes on the clock. Let's see. Delete all subscriptions in one shot. Oh, that I don't think there is a way to do that. Is there? Do you
Yeah,
have one?
good question. No, I don't think there is. And I think I did see we've got Ramesh answering earlier today. So thank you, Ramesh, for putting your thoughts in there. And I would agree with him that there's really not a single command. You can run a command to get the subscriptions that might be on a queue, and then you'd programmatically have to go through and remove each of those subscriptions. And that would be for some V1 and V2.
Correct. And in a kind of a bit of an extension, with our direct messaging APIs, well, all APIs can do both, but with a direct subscriber, this has been asked before as well. Like, is there a way to just remove all the subscriptions from a direct subscriber? And the answer is no. You have to kind of remove them, unsubscribe one by one, or you just disconnect, and then they're all gone. But obviously, that doesn't work with queues. So yeah, short answer, nope. Use a loop. That's kind of the way to do it.
Yeah.
Manikanta, yes. Thanks for tagging me, but the experts got to it first. All right. Well, hey, we're at the top of the hour. It is 1 o'clock here in Ottawa. I guess it's 10 a.m. for you. Ready for a coffee there, Leah? Ready to?
Yeah, I've had one over here. It's been away, but it's a little cold now.
Yeah. All right. So you know what? That's been great. We're gonna wrap it up now. Thanks, Leah, for joining us and joining me on this first kind of North American time zone office hours. It's great to be here, and we got some good
Yeah.
questions, I think.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in and for asking your questions live, and anything that we might have missed or you want to get more info on, we've still got that Solace community. You can head over there and we'll check them out.
That's right. There is the URL in case we didn't mention it quite enough. So thanks very much. And I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, Aaron.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.